Hello, hi everyone. So I think we should begin. Although it's right now it's 8 people. I don't know if all the speakers have joined already or not. Uh, so we have Deepak, and then we have Ashna, then we have Sadasivam and Yogesh Mani, and then we have Utkarsh. So I don't think Utkarsh joined. I think Utkarsh has not.
No, not yet.
Okay, and also yes, Ashna also has not joined. I mean, I
Yes,
don't.
I'm giving them a reminder.
Yes. Okay, great, great. So let us wait for maybe a minute and then start the session.
Sir, I have a PPT, so shall I be sharing the screen or do I have to send
Yes.
the?
I
Okay,
think
got it.
share the screen. Can you share the screen? Can you present your screen?
Let me try.
There's a button, I think, at the bottom, middle button, which says present now. You just have to press on that. Yes. Yes. Perfect.
It's visible, right?
Yeah, it is. So, all right. I think you can stop it now. So let us begin, and your presentation will be the first. So yeah.
So welcome and good afternoon to everyone present here. This session is parallel session 22, titled Anticaste Thought, that will be chaired by Mr. Rajat Roy. Rajat Roy is an assistant professor at the Department of Political Science, Presidency University, Kolkata. Before joining Presidency University, he taught at Shahid Bhagat Singh Evening College and Indraprastha College for Women, University of Delhi, for more than 2 years as an ad hoc assistant professor. He is a recipient of the INLAC's Research Fellowship 2016 and was offered a visiting fellow position at the New Zealand India Research Institute, Victoria University, Wellington in 2017. He is also a final semester doctoral candidate at the Center for Political Studies, School of Social Sciences, GNU, and is presently writing his dissertation on caste and post-colonial theory. His areas of interest are Dalit literature, caste politics, and political theology. So now, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Surushi. Thank you for the introduction. This session is, we have 4 speakers in this session, and it's going to be intensely discursive, because I want also all of you to kind of not only present but also maybe engage with each other's paper. I think that would be the best way to kind of learn from each other. I want, so therefore, all of you kind of not to be too much engrossed in your own paper which you're going to present, but also maybe like bring out your suggestions, your opinions, and your comments on others' paper as well. Alongside, I'll also try to do that. So today we have speakers, 4 scholars, actually 5 scholars, and on different themes, very different themes, and they're being put together within the thematic of anti-caste thought. And our attempt in this session should be kind of try to put them together, maybe make them kind of converse on different issues which are related to colonialism, modernity, issues related to anti-caste thinking, and as well as for example, Utkarsh paper is annihilation. So from anti-caste thinking to annihilation, are they different? Is something which is kind of, can we have a conversation between these? So first speaker is going to be Deepak Kumar Arya, who is going to speak on Hari Prasad Tamta and Anticasteism in British Kumaon region. Deepak, let me introduce all the speakers first, and then maybe we can go one after another in this order. Deepak is a PhD research scholar at the Center for Comparative Literature at University of Hyderabad. His research interests include Indian literature, Dalit literature, modernity, nation, culture, and civilization. He's also interested in exploring questions such as how have different social groups conceptualized modernity in India, what does it mean to be a Dalit and modern at the same time, and what is the relationship between caste and modernity. So broadly within this within this pattern of questions, we can place his paper as well. And a second paper, which is also paper number 86, is titled as the Iconoclast and the Conformist and their Caste Reformation, Contextualizing the Ideological Conflict of Gandhi and Periyar. So instead of Gandhi and Ambedkar debate, which has been kind of quite frequently caught our attention, here Gandhi and Periyar debates and discussion, the conflicts, the ideological positions are being dealt with by Ashna Asok. Ashna Asok is a final year she's a final year MPhil scholar at the Department of English, University of Delhi. Her areas of research interest include female sexuality studies, silences in literature, anti-caste intellectual history, and Malayalam anti-caste literature. Then third paper is going to be presented it's written by two scholars. One is P. Sadasivam and Yogesh D. So this paper is titled as Intellectual Praxis of Iyothee Thass, Revisiting the Construction of Anti-Caste Discourses in Colonial Tamil Nadu. So from British Kumaon to Gandhi Periyar, and then we have Iyothee Thass. And Sadasivam is presently working as an assistant professor in history at the Madras Christian College, Chennai, Tamil Nadu. He did his MA in history from St. Joseph's College and MPhil in history at Loyola College, and currently writing his dissertation on caste struggle and identity, a socio-political history of Dalits in colonial Tamil Nadu. This thesis is focused in between the time period of 1869 to 1947. At Bharati Darshan University, his research interest lies in colonial and post-colonial history of the marginalized, caste and identity politics. Recently, he has completed a UGC minor research project titled Dalit and Educational Development, a historical mapping of qualitative changes through various welfare schemes in Tamil Nadu from 1991 to 2011. Yogesh D, who has also co-authored this paper, is presently pursuing his master's in history at Madras Christian College, Chennai. He had presented two research articles titled Caste Homicides and Paralysis of Dalit Assertion, a case study of Vembatur village in Tamil Nadu. And the second paper is titled as Dalit Assertion in Tamil Cinema, Countering Caste Common Sense and Contesting Hegemonies at University as conferences organized in Loyola Forum of Historical Research and Tamil Nadu History Congress, respectively. His research interest lies in colonial and post-colonial history of caste, Dalit, popular culture, cinema, and Dalit assertion. The last paper, the final paper in this session, is written by Utkarsh. Okay, Ansha will not be able to join. Okay, fine, absolutely fine. So we have four papers, which gives us a little longer time. Fourth paper is by Utkarsh Kobragare. He has written this paper, which is titled as Resisting Caste, Theorising and Annihilationist Project. Utkarsh is a final year MPhil student at Center for Philosophical Studies, Center for Philosophy, JNU, New Delhi. He's completed his master's degree in Dalit and Tribal Studies from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, TIS Bombay. For his MA dissertation, he engaged with the caste violence affected community in Una, Gujarat. For his MPhil in philosophy, he worked on the title Social Construction of Caste as a dissertation title. He is interested in social philosophy and especially in understanding caste and untouchability from the lens of philosophy and on the question of how philosophy could assist anti-caste movements. Some of the areas he intends to work on are critical caste theory, Ambedkar's philosophy and the philosophy of Navayana Buddhism. He intends to train himself in epistemology and metaphysics and look forward to engaging in a philosophical analysis of Indian social reality. So these are all four speakers we have. One speaker will not be able to join with us today, but I think we should begin. So I think we'll begin with you, Deepak, and then move to Sadasivam. I can see Sadasivam present. So first Deepak and then Sadasivam, and after that we go to Utkarsh's paper. Utkarsh, if he is there, we'll go into Utkarsh's paper. So Deepak, over to you. You have roughly, let's say, 20 minutes. You can take a little longer as well. Okay.
Is my screen visible?
Yeah, your screen is
I
visible.
am sharing a PPT.
Yeah, you please do that. Also, it is requested to, when you speak, if you can possibly just switch on your video. Okay.
Okay,
That.
the network is not very stable here. That's why I'm keeping it
All
off
right.
because I'm
Fine. Then
also
it's fine.
presenting a PPT.
Absolutely. All right. Go
Okay.
ahead, please. Will you not be speaking, Deepak?
Sorry. I just didn't realize my mic was off.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, the title of the paper is Hariprasad Tamta and Anticasteism in British Kumaon in the early 20th century. Uh, in this paper, I hope to examine the debates concerning Dalits in the discourse of nationalism in the early 20th century in British Kumaon. My attempt is to extend the conception of nationalist imagination of Dalits and also to explore various other positions taken up by them. So for that, I just give short, very brief definition of these two terms, which not many people will be familiar with here. So who were the Shilpkas? Shilpkas is basically an umbrella term and it includes various lower castes. It was given by Lala Lajpat Rai in 1913 and the British government also officially recognized it in 1925. And even to this day, the caste certificates in Uttarakhand documents lower caste as Shilp caste. And Kumaon refers to the Kumaon division of present-day Uttarakhand. It includes the districts of Almora, Bageshwar, Champawat, Nainital, Pithoragarh, and Udham Singh Nagar. This was the Kumaon district of Kumaon division from 1815 to 1930. Now, in this paper, I am arguing that the Shilpkas of Kumaon constructed a discourse that can be located in their socio-economic context. It can be read as a different discourse in which anti-colonialism and upper caste nationalism did not occupy a central stage. The Shilpkas formed committees, they launched various programs, they organized social movements which were centered around their socio-political and economic issues. And they their rising demands reflected the deprivation that caste had imposed on them. Some of these demands were for lands, equal treatment, employment, education, and good healthcare. These I have taken them as these were the objectives of the Tamta Sudhar Sabha. It was the first Shilpkar organization which was established in 1905. Hariprasad Tamta was one of the key figures who gave articulation to these views that I'm talking about in today's paper. The arguments of the paper are situated within the theoretical framework of G. Aloysius and Chinniya Jingam. Aloysius, in his book Nationalism Without a Nation in India, has critiqued the mainstream understanding of nationalism and nationalist movements in India and has offered a perspective of the quote unquote submerged masses. Similarly, Jangam Chennai has also argued that the dominant nationalist narrative in India has portrayed Dalits as passive subjects. He argues that Dalits actively tried to shape India, but the dominant narratives tend to exclude their efforts. Thus, in this way, both writers have presented the Dalit perspective on nation and nationalism. So here in this paper, I am analyzing excerpts from three patrikas. First is the Almora Akhbar. It was a weekly patrika, and it was started and edited by Govind Vallabh Pant. And second is the Garhwali, and it was edited by Girija Dutt Nethani, Tara Dutt Goirola, and Vishwambar Dutt Chandola. And third is called The Samta. It was a weekly newspaper, weekly patrika, and it was started and edited by Hariprasad Tamta and Lalita Prasad Tamta. These were weekly or monthly patrikas and were written in English, Hindi language, and in Devanagari script. These newspapers, I have taken them because Pushpesh Pandey and Niti Pandey have said that these newspapers did a great favor by awakening and organizing the masses, a factor which came in quite handy when British Kumaon plunged into the wave of national movement. So writings in the first two patrikas, the Almoragbah and the Garhwali, inclined more towards offering a criticism of the British government in India. However, Samta mainly focused on addressing the issues pertaining to the Shilpkar community, which is the Dalit community in Uttarakhand. The excerpts help us to make a distinction between the upper caste conceptualization of nationalism and the lower caste conceptualization of nationalism. So this is the second section of my paper. It's called the dignity, respect, and nation. Here I'm starting it with this excerpt, which was published in 1935, 6th May, in the Tamta Patrika, and the Samta Patrika, and it was written by Hariprasad Tamta. He says, in 1911, on the event of the King George V's coronation, a celebration was held, but I and my lower caste brethren were not allowed to be a part of this celebration of India. I still remember that people even remarked that if lower caste people like me are allowed to enter, it will cause many riots. I am extremely thankful to those upper caste people for waking me and my fellows from a deep slumber. That incident of humiliation kindled the desire in my heart to uplift my people to such a height that everyone would start treating them with love and as equals. Now, I want you to pay attention to Tamta's use of the words celebration of India and the exclusion of Dalits from it. The threat of an imminent riot is also invoked. Tamta judicially used this incident of humiliation to spread awareness among the Shilpkas about their plight and their place in the Brahminic structure of society. His criticism against the elite caste was not limited to merely complaining about the humiliation. He also states his objective of elevating the Shilpkas in order for them to be treated with dignity and respect in society. Tamta had donated a significant amount of money for the coronation event, but despite that, he was asked to sit separately from the sitting area reserved for the upper caste. This incident had a deep effect on him, and it later on influenced his politics, which was consciously founded on principles of equality and anti-casteism. In this respect, even the name of the Patrika was carefully chosen as Samta, which means which was to imply a strong meaning of equality. Furthermore, it is crucial to point out that Tamta is not communicating with the elite caste in his writing, in his Patrika. He is talking to the Shilp caste. In contrast, the writings published by the other Patrikas, the Almoragbah and the Garhwali, tried to communicate with the elite caste. After he had published this writing, which I just read, the other two Patrikas also followed in bringing the issues related to caste. They appealed to the elite caste Hindus to abolish the practice of untouchability. Mostly these writings were produced by the elite caste, and their solution to the problems of Shilp caste was very superficial. There were three common characteristics in most of these writings that I have pointed out. Firstly, they merely implored the upper caste to change their behavior towards the lower caste. Thus, the responsibility of the Hindu elite caste was not towards the Shilp caste and in terms of bringing any significant upliftment, but towards their own attitude. This can be seen as an attempt to diffuse the rising concrete demands of the Shilp caste. The focus in these writings is shifted from the real tangible issues to merely an issue of bad treatment. It was rare for these writings to connect the issues of the Shilp caste with their socio-economic conditions. As the result, the solutions were also sought in less political domain. Now, secondly, they were not motivated to change the socio-economic conditions of the Shilp caste for the better. Rather, they were alarmed by the Shilp caste support for the English government. This is the reason they had made symbolic attempts to bring out the issues of the Shilp caste. Therefore, these attempts were made less from a zeal to improve the condition of the Shilp caste and more from a fear of change in Shilp caste political economic status that was resulting from the benefits that they were receiving from the British government. This fear of encroachment is reflected in many writings published by these Patrikas. Thirdly, the conversion of the Shilp caste into Christianity imperiled the caste dominance of the elite caste Hindus, and therefore these writings can be read as a plea to the elite caste Hindus to incorporate the Shilpkas into the Hindu fold. For many, the conversion was a threat to the perceived unity of all Hindus. One writing published in Garhwali Patrika highlights all three characteristics that I've mentioned above. I'm quoting, the untouchables should be treated with respect, the differences should be reduced, the improvement in their social conditions should be celebrated, and they should be seen as essential members of the society. If the people, and this is where the focus should be, if the people belonging to the lower caste leave the Hindu religion, there is no hesitation in telling that India will be without hands and feet. The metaphor of hands and feet implies that the only source of value that can be derived from Shilpkas is from their work, the kind of work they engage in. The change was sought in terms of upper caste people's treatment of and attitude towards the Shilpkas. The writing is addressing the elite caste and it is requesting them to reduce the caste differences. It did not take into account the socio-economic conditions of the Shilpkas and the various prohibitions that were imposed on them. Furthermore, there is an anxiety over the lower caste converting to other religion. It is very evidently expressed as a caution to the elite caste. Thus, the solution to the problem of caste was sought from a religious bent, not from a secular bent. This is to basically say that these writings did not invoke the rhetoric of equality for all citizens or egalitarianism or anti-casteism, or did not criticize the entire structure of caste. The Almoda Akbar also published similar pieces. This trend of writing about the issues of the Shilpkar caste began in 1912. Anwar Ansari has also argued that this was a result of the crucial event of 1911, which the Hari Prasad Tamta incident. Now the third section is called Nationalism, Colonialism and Materiality. In the early 1920s, the non-cooperation movement was spreading to many states in India and it drew the support of many people in British Kumaon as well. But Hari Prasad Tamta advocated against its practice to the Shilpkas. He said, and I'm quoting, "We should not aggravate the caste war, but we should support the persons who cooperate with the British government. It is owing to them that we have now been elevated from the category of animals and are at long last being counted as human beings. Supporting the men behind non-cooperation who are against the government may have benefits or harms for others, but for the untouchables, it would entail only harm." This is, he is saying this. I have, in the bracket, I have also put the citations, references. Hari Prasad Samta relied more on the British government than the elite caste Hindus. This perception of the British and also the Hindu caste was not formed in a vacuum. There were tracts of land which were earmarked for lower caste to build houses, although not in the main town area, but in the forest adjoining the towns, lest the higher caste people took umbrage. This tracts of land was given by the British government. A correspondence between Hari Prasad Tamta and the Deputy Commissioner of Almora in 1934 reveals that the British government extended more support to the Shilpkas in terms of material changes in their condition. On the other hand, the elite caste solution to the issues of Shilpkas remained constricted to a change in attitude. In December 32, Kumaon Samaj Sammelan, it's called the Kumaon Society Conference, was organized under the presidency of Badridar Joshi. On 11th and 12th December 1932, Barrister Mukandila, one of the chairpersons of the conference stated that the untouchable caste should not quit their hereditary profession, and the Savarna caste should treat them with decency. The untouchable should not be stopped from using Dola Dandi. So Dola Dandi was basically, it is still practice. It is a practice of carrying brides and grooms in palanquins. The untouchables were not allowed to use Dola Palki in their marriage ceremony. Now, the words treat them with decency does not imply that the lower castes are to be given equal treatment. The Hindi word that he uses is called uchit, which means in proper ways. What the proper ways are is not stated very clearly in his writing. Furthermore, he advocated against quitting the hereditary profession by the Shilp caste. These writings carefully avoid any stance against the wider structure of the caste. They do not offer any critique against the hierarchical nature of the caste. Rather, they focus on the attitude of the upper caste. The objective of these writings was never to challenge or attack the caste structure in order to create an equal society, but to merely request the higher caste to treat the Shilp caste with decency, in other ways, in proper ways, so that they would continue with their hereditary profession and thus occupy the same lowered rank in the society. Lastly, the Christian missionary, backed by colonial rulers, played an active role in converting the people from the oppressed caste groups. In response to this growing anxiety of the elite caste, the Hindu reformist Arya Samajis took initiative to keep the lower caste within the fold of the Hindu religion. In 1913, Lala Lajpat Rai paid a visit to Sunkia village of Nainital district on the day of Baishakhi. It's a festival. Baishakhi is a festival celebrated in Uttarakhand. He held an event to purify the Shilp caste by performing religious rituals on them. He called it Suddhi Karna. At the end of the event, he socially sanctioned them to wear Janeyu. This is that secret thread which Brahmins wear, with the objective of halting their conversion to other religions. And in this event, he also gave them a new term. He named them Aryas instead of, so afterwards they changed their surname. Fitting in with the initiatives of the Hindu reformists, Taradat Goirola wrote in Almora Akbar, "We must change our attitude towards the Shilp caste." Again, the focus is in almost all these upper caste writings, the focus is always on the attitude and the behavior and the treatment. The Indian government must also work for their upliftment. Otherwise, they will become Christian and Muslims, and this will destroy Hindu unity. So there is a very tangible fear that these writings express among the upper caste. There is no zeal of egalitarianism. Now, the underlying assumption is that if the upper caste people change their attitude towards the Shilp caste, their external conditions will also automatically improve. The objective here is to keep them in the fold of the Hindu religion, not to liberate them. The absence of criticism against attaching the lower caste ranks to the Shilp caste is not unintentional. It basically highlights the approach of the upper caste who tried to give a religious solution to the socio-economic problems of the Shilp caste. These methods can be linked with the Gandhian solution to the Dalit question. Aloysius argues that the Gandhian solution to the lower caste and other dispossessed groups was a conscious and calculated attempt to displace the secular and political by religious and symbolic. And this religious discourse of Gandhi within the new political praxis meant religion for the lower caste masses and politics for the upper caste nationalists. Similarly, Jingam Chennaiya in his book Dalits and the Making of Modern India puts forth the argument that in the mainstream Indian narrative, the story of Dalits is also one of misrecognition, invisibility, or misrepresentation as dumb millions who cannot articulate their own suffering and are thereby robbed of their agency. His book argues that Dalits' understanding and imagination of nation is actually quite different from their caste Hindu counterparts. It envisions the very meaning of nationalism in India. In this regard, British Kumaon was no exception. The establishment of Tamta Sudhar Sabha, later renamed as Kumaon Shilpka Sabha in 1914, played a crucial role in making egalitarian demands on behalf of the Shilpkas. The demands were for the propagation of education, representation in panchayat, land for the untouchables, removal of caste slurs, prevention of drugs and intoxication, and this was very much linked with the issues, the gender issues at that point. This prohibition of child marriage and promotion of widow marriage. The last three issues are keeping in mind the issues concerning the women, the Dalit women. So, yeah, thus the Shilpkar imagination provides a more egalitarian conception of Indian society than the upper caste conception that
Deepak,
right.
finish in 1 minute if it's possible. Although we have time, please go ahead.
I just have
Yeah.
one small conclusion, which is mostly the arguments that I'm trying to make from these excerpts. Okay, I'll be very quick.
Good.
The nationalist movements in British Kumaon, in the form of the Swadeshi movement and non-cooperation movement, expressed the views and demands of the upper caste Hindus. In pursuing the freedom of the nation, these movements were unsympathetic and even insensitive to the rising demands of the lower caste. While the lower caste wanted to create a society based on egalitarian ethics, the upper caste discourse on uh, upper caste discourse on national freedom focused mainly on expelling the colonial rulers and thereby taking the power in their hand. In these movements, the idea of our freedom, our country, was invoked very frequently. However, the crucial characteristic of this idea of our country was that it did not incorporate the demands of the lower caste, or they. The upper caste Hindus wanted to preserve and maintain their caste dominance over the lower caste, and their demands for the freedom of the nation was tied in with this zeal to acquire power from the British, which they saw as rightfully theirs. For them, freedom could only be actualized once the English government leaves the country. As opposed to this view, the freedom for the lower caste was not so much centered around the expulsion of the English. They wanted to improve their social conditions, and for this purpose, the English government had been more sympathetic to their needs than the upper caste. And when the Shilpas extended their support to the English government, they were pejoratively labeled as pro-colonialist. To the lower caste, the colonial forces had opened up a possibility of change in their life, which was not available to them in the older system. Thus, extending support to the nationalist movement meant jeopardizing the small possibility of gaining some mobility that they had recently opened. Moreover, the lower caste were already excluded from the discourse of the national movement. It really talked about them in its initial stage. Only when the lower caste began to articulate their voice through other means like conversion and supporting the colonials did the upper caste Hindus pay more mere symbolic attention to their cause. In this regard, Janayu and the imposition of Arya surname by the Arya Samajas and Lala Lajpat Rai to all the Shilpkas in British Kumar were two key initiatives. It had resulted in criticism against the practice of untouchability and segregation. It also led to changes like the creation of new terms, Shilpka, to do away with the pejorativeness of the existing caste slurs such as Dom. Some of the writings in the Patrika also extended their support to the Shilpka movement against the prohibition of using Dola Palki. However, it was not pursued to create an egalitarian society. It was simply an adjustment in their system to incorporate and subdue the rising demands of the Shilpkas. It was an attempt to consolidate the Shilpkas under the nationalist fold without bringing any substantial change in their condition of living in order to challenge the English. The larger implication of this paper, I'm almost done with my paper. The larger implication of this paper is to add more to the nationalist history of India, which has thus far portrayed Dalits as either as mute participants or as passive recipient of exclusionary practice, by showing that the Dalits not only actively participated but also shaped the discourse surrounding egalitarian idea of nationalism, and at the same time showing it distinct from the upper caste Hindu nationalism. I'm hoping to expand our understanding of Dalit conceptualization of nation and nationalism. I also want to mention that I have collected this data from only a pilot studies. Therefore, my larger plan is to enrich it more by doing a better fieldwork so that I can build my arguments upon it. Yeah, I am almost. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deepak. Well, we had a fantastic paper from Deepak, and now we will move to the second paper. Second paper was on Periyar and Gandhi. Since the speaker has not, I think the speaker has not joined with us yet. So we'll go to the third paper, which is paper number 87. I've already introduced the authors. So maybe we should begin with Sadasivam and Yogesh Mani. Please go ahead. Maybe one of you will present, right? Sadasivam. So the paper is titled Intellectual Praxis of Iyothee Thass, Revisiting the Construction of Anti-Caste Discourses in Colonial Tamil Nadu. Sadasivam, over to you.
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Yes. Good morning to one and all, respected chairperson.
Again, I'm the same request we have been asked to do. Can you please switch on the video?
I have. Yeah, I have. I think. Yeah.
Good.
I think that. Yeah. So, good morning to one and all, respected chairperson. So today, Professor Sadasivam and I, Yogesh Mani, are going to present our paper titled "Intellectual Crisis of Iyothee Thass: Revisiting Construction of Anti-Caste Discourse in Colonial Tamil Nadu." Caste and anti-caste discourses have been anchored in two opposite vice versa competing rationals that have been discordant within the South Asian scholarship since the colonial times, the former being deeply rooted in the dialogue between the conventional orthodoxy and colonial morality, while the later being deeply rooted in the dialogue between heterodoxy and colonial modernity. The role of intellectuals in the formulation of any discourse is quite vital, especially in this particular context. Various intellectuals, both from the elite as well as subaltern sections, engage with caste and colonial modernity with diversely articulated languages and vantage points within the framework of colonial public sphere, some trying to legitimize and rationale caste, while other critiquing it. Colonial Tamil society was the earliest amongst other Indian societies to discourse caste, owing to the Oriental scholarship of Madras Presidency that attempted to understand caste through Brahminical literature. This opened up a huge space for the discourse of caste. This actually made caste a legitimate element of discourse in the colonial public sphere. An adherent study of extensive Tamil literature produced during the colonial times would illustrate that the diverse perceptions catered about caste by the intellectuals from varied socio-cultural and economic backgrounds of Tamil society. One of the earliest organic intellectual who critically engaged with caste during the colonial times was Iyothee Thass, who emerged from an opulent section of Dalit subaltern. Pandit Iyothee Thass was born in 1845 at Tenapet, Madras. He was the eldest son in the family. He was given the name of Kathavarayan and spent his life at different parts of the state, namely Nilgiris and Madras, predominantly, of course. He belonged to a middle-class Dalit family, which had all facilities to lead a very comfortable life. His father belonged to his father was from a class that was, of course, put through discrimination, but of course they were, in a sense, they were well-to-do when compared with other Dalits. He was a social reformer who was very much interested in serving the downtrodden and underprivileged. His father wished to give education to him, basically because at that particular point of time, education was prohibited for Dalits by the caste elites. So, in order to ensure a certain limited amount of education, at least to Iyothee Thass, he sent him to Guru V. Iyothee Thass Kabinyer to give him simple education. He was trained in Tamil literature and became a Siddha practitioner too. It was here where he assumes the name of Iyothee Thass from his guru. After a stellar career during the early 20th century, Iyothee Thass was rediscovered recently in the 1990s from the shadows that loomed large in the aftermath of the late 20th social movements. Iyothee Thass' rediscovery was a result of cumulative expression of socio-political dynamics and academic discourse of the last decade. The historical writings on Iyothee Thass can be broadly classified as pre-1990s literature and post-1990 literatures. In the first phase, Iyothee Thass is not, very prominently present in these literature. He is he's not actually obvious in very very writings of this particular time period. But in the second one, he's rediscovered and was his rediscovery was stellar, of course. For Iyothee was very little more than a footnote in the history of Dravidian movement, despite he being the predecessor of the movement. People knew of him through references from the great Tamil writer and political personality Thiruvi Kalyanasundara Mudaliyar in his classical biography of uh, uh, Iyothee. This is one of the earliest mentioning of Iyothee in any form of writing. After this, scholar writer Anbu Ponovian published a monograph titled Palangudi Makkal Tanda Pahuttarivalar Pandidar C. Iyothee Dasar, published in 1962. Another scholar, P.S. Mani, in Dinamani Sudar, wrote a biographical note on Iyothee in 1987. At the same time, A.C. Radhakrishnan, MPhil scholar, submitted a dissertation on Tamilan and its influence on press and scheduled caste community development between 1907 to 1914, and from 1926 to 1933 to the Madras University. From this, one can presume that very scarce writing have been found in the pre-1990s period on Iyothee. The vast majority of these writings were largely focused towards illustration of Iyothee biography and compilation of his writings. In the post-1990s, the first monumental work on Iyothee was in 1993 by Geeta and Rajadurai, who wrote an article titled Dalits and Non-Brahmin Consciousness in Colonial Tamil Nadu in Economic and Politically Weekly. This writing drastically changed the discourse of unearthing Iyothee very effectively. This led to G. Aloysius to search entire writings of him, which resulted in the publication of Iyothee Sindarigal in the last decade of 20th century. Apart from Aloysius' religion as an emancipatory identity, Geeta Rajadurai's towards a non-Brahmin millennium, M.S.S. Pandyan's Brahmin and non-Brahmin, and Ayyathurai's foundations of anti-caste consciousness in English, as well as Gautaman's Iyothee Aibuhal, Dharmaraj's Dan Purva Bautam, and Stalin Rajagam's Valum Bautam in Tamil are particularly phenomenal in creating Iyothee as a discourse and a critique. In this phase, Iyothee was approached from a multi-dimensional perspectives, and his rediscovery is very, in many aspects, by different scholars, was phenomenal in historical sense. From this, a leader who was more active in socio-political engagement in the 19th and 20th century, after a century, was rediscovered through critical historical discourse and in the academic arena. Iyothee was one of the pioneers to mobilize Dalits for the cause of their grievances. The earliest of his political actions was in his youth. He was attached to the Advaita philosophy. Later, he believed that the philosophy would emancipate Dalits from their misery. The excerpt on this doctrine, Iyothee founded the Advaitananda Sabha in 1870 in Nilgiris, where he mobilized tribals in the areas within the framework of Sabhas in order to fight against the Christian missionary activities. Iyothee was much unique on this front, because despite adopting some ideas from the colonial modernity, he still persisted to follow the local traditions and construction of a political voice for the voiceless. In 1898, Iyothee rediscovered and reverted to Buddhism with the help of M.S. Orchid and two school teachers in the Mallika Kanda Vihara located in Ceylon, where he obtained Panchashila at the hands of the Venerable Sri Sumangala. Soon after his return, he established the Sakya Buddhist Society in Royapeta. On the contrary to his earlier understanding of caste and Hindu religion, he was convinced that mere reformation of Hinduism was futile, and the only way to liberate Dalits from the misery of caste was the annihilation of caste by uprooting the Hindu hegemony through returning to the original religion of Buddhism, which he called Purva Bautam. The census being a primary source of knowledge for the colonial state, Iyothee found an opportunity to re-articulate a new identity for the depressed class. The era of 1880s was an important phase in the history of India. It was an era of formation of new regional and national identities within the framework of colonial public sphere. During the census of 1881, he urged the depressed class in the Tamil land to uh, be considered as Adi Tamilar and not as Hindus. He strongly believed that the category of Hindu was materialized by the colonial Brahmin nexus in the British India. From the beginning, Thass criticized this kind of colonial construct and emphasized the prominence of terms like Adi Tamilar, Tamilan, Buddhist, and so on. These terms opened up two things. One, it asserted that they were the original inhabitants of the land in due course enslaved by others, and second, reconstructed the socio-political identity by categorizing them as a separate group from the Hindus with institutional sanctioning, of course. In 1891, Pandit Iyothee established an organization called Dravida Mahajana Sabha, the political organization which addressed the grievances of Dalits of the colonial Tamil Nadu. On 1st December 1891, he organized the first conference of Dravida Mahajana Sabha at Ooty in Nilagiri district. The 10 resolutions that were passed in this particular event were sent to the Indian National Congress and the Mohammedan Association in 21st December 1891. The resolutions included enacting of a criminal punishment for those who humiliate Dalits by calling them Paraya, creating separate schools and providing scholarship for matriculation education for untouchable children, providing jobs for educated untouchables and representation for them in political arena. So this shows that Iyothee have had constant dialogue with the national and regional trends that were going on. And similarly, he also took part in various other political discourses in order to put out his grievances of Dalits in a more wider arena rather than to a very narrowed audience. And of course, he did also critique a lot of the national organizations and regional organizations that prevailed here. For instance, he critiqued the Indian National Congress as an organization of Bengali Brahmins rather than being the true representative of all Indians. On the contrary, he also rejected the identity of non-Brahmin because he found the idea of non-Brahmin was quite vague, and even at times the people who preached non-Brahminism were often people who practiced Brahminical rituals and other Brahminical practices on their personal basis. So he considered it to be a hypocrisy that a person who is following Brahminical norms and still is calling himself a non-Brahmin is an irony. So then he enters into the, after his conversion to Buddhism, he also starts propagating his idea as an intellectual with the establishment of his own newspaper called Oru Paisa Tamilan, which is the most renowned journal in Dalit print history because of its context and ideology. Its first issue was published on 19 June 1907. The 4-page weekly was published every Wednesday in a tabloid size. After a year, its name was changed to Tamilan. The editor mentions that the name of the journal was changed as per the wishes of the readers, who also provided a printing press, which he named as Gautama Press. So this shows that Iyothee, that despite being an individual who's been critiquing caste and fighting against casteism, he was supported by his readers who were also fellow Dalits who had a similar aspiration towards anti-caste discourse. Iyothee wrote a series of articles on social and religious issues in his newspaper. The magazine was instrumental in creating an anti-caste vernacular cosmology of those times, in which he initiated a resilient knowledge practice by using journalism as a tool to gain inroads into the colonial print public sphere, which was undeniably caste-ridden. The journalistic practice apparently created community as a political force that could emerge through the print journalism, especially for Dalit subaltern constituencies in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The newspaper came week after week for the rest of the life of Iyothee, carrying a wealth of information on current events, interpreting of Tamil history, religion, literature, and politics against the dominant and oppressive religious cultural discourses of the time, so as to an alternative discourse. He re-articulated the identity of Periyar. For instance, the earlier understanding of the term Periyar was that they were mere drummers, whereas Iyothee comes up with a new interpretation of the term with the help of Tamil literature and Sangam literature, saying that the idea of Periyar or the identity of Periyar is not merely restricted to connote drummers. Rather, it has more of an intellectual origin to the term. He deems that these Parayars were actually the royal messengers of the Sangam era rather than mere drummers. So in a way, he re-articulates the term Parayar from an inferiorized connotation to an emancipatory identity. And a similar grounds, he has also given a particular level of space to women to write about caste and gender related issues, which is quite absent in rather mainstream contemporary print media. And one striking factor which you could find in Iyothee is that as an intellectual, he formulates an intellectual praxis of in order to construct an anti-caste discourse through his print media. It is that he re-articulates various historical narratives in a certain sense to counter the mainstream narratives of history. For instance, he looks into the festivals that have been celebrated by Tamils from a Dalit perspective, to be more precise, from a Buddhist perspective, and he appropriates those festivals as as a Buddhist reverent. For instance, he calls the Kartikeya Deepam, which is often regarded in contemporary Tamil Nadu as a festival commemorated for Lord Muruga, who's from the Hindu tradition. Rather, Iyothee would argue that it is Kartulla Deepam, which is more dedicated and more leaning towards Buddhist tradition rather than Hindu tradition. So in this way, he was creating a set of memories and a set of anti-caste memories, which were part of the Tamil Buddhist tradition, which he derived from the Tamil literary tradition, in order to construct an anti-caste cosmology so that he could have an anti-caste common sense generated amongst his readers. Thus, the print media, in a sense, brought in a rationalistic resources for the construction of Dalit identity in the colonial Madras. The role of Iyothee as an organic intellectual in formulating an anti-caste discourse through heterodox praxis is quite evident. In colonial Tamil Nadu, different actors of public sphere facilitated Iyothee to intellectually negotiate and construct alternative discourse against hegemonic forces. While the colonial modernity espoused contradictions and different social groups to bargain with political power centers, which escalated Iyothee to construct an anti-caste counteraction in the Tamil Nadu during the nascent years of the national movement, in which casteless identity construction, anti-Brahmanism, alternative religion, and political contention were the major apparatus. Iyothee anti-caste discourse construction was not merely limited to Dalits alone. He tried to establish a common Tamil identity too, in which, for the first time, social justice became the nucleus of Tamil socio-political history. Thus, through his ideology and institutions, Thass laid a strong foundation for the anti-caste discourse in the colonial Tamil Nadu. So that's it for the presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and please don't call me sir. Okay, thank you so much, Sadasivam. Okay. Aishani, do we have the third presenter, or should we go for a discussion right now? Can you please reply if... Do we have Utkarsh? I don't see Utkarsh here, so I'm assuming no, right? All right. So Ashna and Utkarsh, they have not been able to join. One of their paper was on Periyar and Gandhi, and the other one was about anti-caste thinking. So in that case, we are actually done with the presentation in the session. But I really would request both these speakers to kind of engage with each other, because we are talking about the same time. We are discussing thinkers almost at the same time, and or at least addressing questions which are almost similar, but in a very different way. I will have a couple of questions. If there is any question, kindly drop them in the chat box. If anyone from the audience has any question. But before we take up questions, I would also request Sadasivam to maybe engage with what Deepak has spoken about, or Deepak also you can engage with Thass's presentation on Thass. so that we can have a kind of discussion oriented session, as I pointed out at the very beginning. And that is the idea we have had, that we should have a community of people thinking together in a way in this platform on theorizing anti-caste. So so Deepak's paper is addressing questions. Sorry, I have to. Yeah. So Utkarsh's paper is, Deepak's paper is really interesting. He talks about Shilpakar caste and how the Shilpakar, which is a kind of umbrella concept, as he pointed out, how their writings have addressed the question of nation. So I would request you maybe to speak a little bit about these queries. When I was listening to your presentation, some queries I have had, and I would really request you to kind of speak a little more on that, because there are some bit of confusions I have had. For example, firstly, what was Tamta's response towards the missionaries? We've spoken about the missionaries, and how was Tamta responding to that? That would be one of the first questions. So towards kind of not choosing, because this has become one of the biggest part of your paper, that there are two types of journal, if I'm not mistaken. On the one hand, you have Garwali and Almora Patrika, and the other hand, you have Patrikas like Samta. And you seem to be talking about two different kind of positions on, or two different kind of thinking being reflected. One set of thinking which is speaking to the upper caste, the other one is speaking to the Shilpakar by the Shilpakar themselves, right? So given this kind of two different stream of thinking, or two types of positionalities, how would you respond to the question that why did they not kind of choose something like, because they, at the end of the day, you point out that they're going towards appropriating Hinduism, which is at least the second set of journals you mentioned. For example, Garwal journals, the writing which was written towards the caste Hindus pointed out that they were trying to be appropriated within religion, as at least if I'm not mistaken. So what would be their response towards Christianity? Why is that not an option? Something, how do you kind of explain that phenomenon? And secondly, a more larger question I was thinking about is that at the end of the day, which the way at least you put it in front of me, is that there is no kind of new communities being thought about. Is rather appropriation, as I've already pointed out, within a larger narrative of nationalistic ideology or religion of Hinduism has kind of played a crucial role in shaping their social visions. So what do you imply by saying this? Like, do you mean to say at the end of the day that so where is that autonomy, that agency which we are looking for after reading, let's say, Jangam or Aloysius's work you have talked about? Or when you think about scholars like Guru, for example, and the formulation he has with regard to beyond, right? So you have a Deshi framework, derivative framework, and there's a beyond framework which is talking in negative language. So can Tamta offer us something of a different type of reading? Deepak, what do you think? Like, I'm just thinking out loud. What are your thoughts on this?
Sir, I'll begin by...
Please call me Rajat. Please call me Rajat. Yeah, please go ahead.
So I will start this question by first saying that this is the data that I've been able to gather only from a pilot study. So I need I haven't actually accessed the archive yet. So after only accessing the archive in Uttarakhand, will I be able to say more things with more confidence here? But nonetheless, I'll go back to the things that you were saying. So firstly, I've tried to talk about two kinds of ways in which arguments emerge from these excerpts. One is the upper caste argument, which is talking about caste and giving a very apolitical sort of a solution to these their real tangible social issues. It is not trying to actually do any good to their social issues. It's mostly trying to make an accommodation. It's mere adjustment to their problems so that the Shilp caste can be kept within the Hindu fold and be used as pawns for the nationalist movements. Okay. Now, secondly, you have the kind of writings that Tamta offers through his Patrika, the Samta Patrika. Even the title itself goes against the other kind of writings that I took excerpts, I have gathered excerpts from. So in his writings, it's very evident that he is not willing to side with the upper caste at any rate. He is making a very distinct sort of politics wherein he's addressing the lower caste, he's talking to them, and he's asking them to extend their support to the British, and at the same time to he's also talking about their dignity, their respect, which they can cultivate only by themselves. I, because of the shortage of time, I could not add many excerpts. So here he says in the last, the first excerpt that I had taken, that incident of humiliation kindled a desire in my heart to uplift my people to elevate my people to such a height that everyone would start treating them with love and as equal. So because of with these motivations, he had started this uh, uh, whole organization which he called Tamta Sudhar Sabha. There were a lot of practices, teachings, and other things, lot of initiatives that he took in that through that organization, which kind of uh, can be used to formulate a new understanding of communities. But I am going to reserve my judgments here, reserve my opinions, because I haven't actually looked up. I haven't been able to access those archives. So because of that, there is limitations because of the archive.
Sure, no problem. Another query is, I mean, you can think about it because this response which Tamta has, the way he is trying to envision a new community, let's say, which is distinct than, it's not British loyalism, neither it is upper caste form of nationalism, as you mentioned so rightly. This is something which kind of, as we notice in many parts of India, somehow gets dissolved. Especially, like, for example, we can think about the work of the Paraya problem, right? Where we see that the work of the spiritualization of national body through Gandhi being, the separate electorate issue, Gandhi becoming one of the national figure also makes kind of appropriates many such views, make all these masses, Anticaste thinkers being a part of the nationalist discourse, which is nonetheless like, upper caste. So, I mean, this is something, I mean, if you can respond or maybe think about, is that what happens to this thought, this Samta Patrika, when Gandhi becomes a very overarching framework, if I'm able to put myself, kind of clearly here.
Yes, sir. Sir, so
Yeah.
when Gandhi becomes, even then it actually does not dissolve very clearly. I had quoted one
Hmm.
excerpts to highlight that,
Hmm.
wherein Tamta himself says we should not uh, aggravate the caste war, but we should support the persons who cooperate with the British government. So he is basically right now addressing the whole accusations that when lower castes were trying to highlight their issues, they were often accused of aggravating the caste war. So he is saying that we should not, again, he's addressing to the Shilp caste, we should
Hmm.
not aggravate the caste war,
Hmm.
but we should support the persons who cooperate with the government.
Hmm.
And the reasons he gives is it is owing to them that that we have now been elevated from the category of animals and are at last being counted as human beings. Supporting the men behind the non-cooperation who are against the government may have benefits or harms for others, but for the untouchables, it would only uh, it would entail only harm.
Mm.
So here, even after coming, if even after the whole entry of Gandhi, I don't think it dissolves. I think here it would be more. It might be better to look at the arguments that uh, Jingam Chennaiya offers.
Mm.
Basically, he says that it is the this is not. It's basically owing to the mainstream. Uh, just a second, I'll just gather
Mhm.
my
Mm.
arguments
Mm.
here. Yeah, he basically says that the mainstream Indian narrative represents the story of the Dalits as dumb billions who cannot articulate their own sufferings, are thereby robbed of their agency. I don't think it was so. I think it's just that one sort of narrative takes power over the other. Therefore, you have difficulty conceptualizing that Dalits also articulated their sufferings. They also made their egalitarian demands. They also uh, actively participated in discourse regarding nationalism. I think it is. I would uh, incline my arguments. Jingam Chennai.
Sorry, I don't know if I was showing that there was a problem with my network. So, Deepak, I think you can hear me, right? So, I think we'll come to Sadasivam and maybe to back to you again.
Yes.
Is the aspect about invoking a tradition, invoking a memory becomes one of the content of this Anticaste discourses, which both of you we all are thinking about, and that brings me to the paper which Sadashivam has talked about very fascinatingly. Both of your papers are really fascinating to me, and a lot of learning I have had through these papers. My point is, could you you have spoken a lot about the heterodox tradition, right? So could you speak a little bit about this before I kind of move into that Buddhist memory? You've spoken about heterodox tradition. Could you just unpack that a little bit? Like someone who is coming from Vedantic, Sabha Vedanta tradition in the earlier life, and then going into discussing heterodox tradition. So, what is it that you are speaking about when you're mentioning this with regard to Thass? That would be something which is linked with my another question. Is that uh, mm, Tamil Buddhist memory which he invokes, and let's say Ambedkar's Navayana, which we are familiar with. Do we see a kind of conversation? I mean, how do you kind of see these two forms of invoking of Buddhism, or these two sets of, let's say, memories which are being brought back in this time? How do you kind of think about it? And can I have the third set of question? Is it okay? I mean, like this is something which I was curious about. Is that pre 1990 and post 1990 phenomena? What causes this transition? What do you think? Like there's a new creation of a new kind of Aitithas, a new discourse. Like as we have mentioned, rightly mentioned, Ayathurai, my friend Leonard. So all of them have been kind of given a really, and then of course Pandian and many others. They have kind of given a new kind of language, they've created a new discourse. What is the how do you see this phenomenon, since you mentioned this to be one of the important factor in thinking about Thass?
Yes. So, while talking about the invocation of tradition for ideological claims and his aspirations, of course, now talking about the heterodoxical tradition from which he derives, Buddhism, or from which he derives this idea of rationalism or the idea of anti-casteism, is deeply rooted in the Tamil literature. If you look at Ayodhya's forefathers, one of his forefathers actually, safeguarded the Thirukural, which is known in Tamil as Ulaga Podumarai, which has a lot of heterodoxical ideas within its literary framework, has been given to the Tamil society by his forefathers. So, in that sense, he was also introduced these literatures at a specific time period, which led him to explore beyond Advaita philosophy. And when talking about this heterodoxical Tamil tradition, you also have a lot of heterodoxical tradition which are quite disorganized or unorganized. For instance, if you look at one of the interpretations of Iyothee about the local deities of the Tamil folklore tradition is that, for instance, you have deities like Karpaswami, you have deities like Ayyanar. He interprets these deities as Buddhist figures. He even goes on to say that these deities have not found their place in the mainstream Hinduism just because they have a Buddhist past. If you even today, I think there have been various researches and even archaeological expeditions which have found that most of these local deities have a Buddhist past, or at some and even at times there are even statues of Buddhas which have been converted into local village deities. So it is these material findings that forces Iyothee to take up this particular narrative of the past. And looking at Buddhism that Iyothee preaches is that in a sense it is definitely different from what Ambedkar derives from Buddhism. Ambedkar would rather have a pan-Indian approach towards Buddhism. He derives Buddhism from its the actual origin of it, whereas Iyothee on the contrary, he would rather restrict the origin or the derivation of Buddhism for an anti-caste discourse within the framework of Tamil literature and Tamil tradition. He would argue that Buddhism was the original religion of not just Dalits, but of entire Tamil ethnic group itself. And he would say that this Buddhism is not merely a religion that is about just worshipping God. Rather, it is about it is basically a civilizational intervention of a society that is ridden by caste. So the civilizational intervention of Buddhism is deemed quite necessary by Iyothee to construct an imaginary identity, an imaginary casteless identity, so that they could annihilate caste in a sense. I think that is I have answered the first two set of questions. The last question of post 90s literature and pre 90s literature would be answered by Professor Sadasivam.
So good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
So this is Sadasivam.
Yeah, okay.
Paper presented by Yogesh.
Okay, sorry.
It's quite interesting. So no problem. Actually, it's really interesting. So when I first looked at Iyothee, so first I started looking at Iyothee only in a historiographical background. So I didn't see the Iyothee into ideological setting. So first I started looking at Iyothee only in a historiographical background. So I was reading some articles on Iyothee from the beginning. So when I started, then I gone through that Dickens-Leonard's article. So when I read the article of Dickens, and he actually mentioned all these things. So how the writings of Iyothee from both English and Tamil depicting him as an anti-caste ideologist in colonial Tamil Nadu. So my thought actually went into further. Then I started searching on that. Why 1990? So what exactly happened in 1990? How about a pre-1990? First I didn't look at a pre-1990, but only I started why 1990? Why in the last decade of 20th century it happened? So where by reading some of the writers of Gajendran Ayathurai, Stalin Rajangam, Geeta and Rajadurai, and all these people, then I identified that some of the reasons behind why they actually identified the reason for Iyothee becoming a major icon of Tamil history, particularly in the last decade of the 20th century. The first one, actually, I'm not giving into the chronological order, I'm giving in whatever the things actually. The first one, actually, the centenary celebrations of Ambedkar. The second one, actually, the emergence of Dalit political parties in Tamil Nadu, especially the Vidudalai Sirthigal and the Pudhiya Tamilagam Katchi in Tamil Nadu. And the third one, actually, the emergence of subaltern studies in Indian historiography. In 1980s, it started here. And the most important thing, actually, I met the person who actually responsible for bringing that Iyothee Das in the Nigger. Actually, there was a person named Anbu Ponnuviyam, and who actually gave these writings to Aloysius, and both of them actually together worked and they published Iyothee Das in the Nigger. And who was the person actually kept all the newspapers for quite a long time of the Urupaisa, Tamil and other things. So he said that that period actually really important phase for Iyothee Das, and these factors actually really played a crucial part. Apart from this, actually he gave the another two reasons also. One was actually the Mandal Commission's recommendations and the thinking of the reservation concepts in India. And the next thing, actually, the emergence of the Hindutva forces in the end of 20th century. So all these factors actually facilitated to find someone who counter the ideology of all this. At the same time, the Dalit political parties' emergence actually played a vital part. The centenary celebrations of Ambedkar and the emergence of these Dalit political parties and the bringing of a new kind of a historiography. So it is a combination of factors actually played a part here. Then we started looking at, so how about a 1990, pre-1919 era, how they started looking at Iyothee Das? Because they have written already some books on Iyothee Das, but how they started looking at. So we started to look, find so many materials on Iyothee Das in the pre-1919 era. But very rarely we could identify that. Even the thesis actually we mentioned in the paper, the MPhil project, the person who actually did in 1986 in Madras Christian College under the CJ Nimmal, somewhere we actually cleaning the department, we found this thesis. It didn't happen. We went and collected a thesis. We were cleaning the department library, and we found that this thesis on Iyothee Das. It was really surprising for a person who did a Iyothee Das in 1987 itself. So we took that thesis actually. Then we went and started looking at who and all the persons previously have done on this. So we found that Anbu Ponnuviyam, then there is a person named P.S. Mani, and he wrote in a small article on Iyothee Das. And there is another person, Dalit Elinmalai and Ravi Kumar, the present Vidudalai Sirithaigal MP. So, and both of them actually compiled a small volume of Iyothee Das. So all these things actually we started to look. So from this perspective, we started looking the post-1919 era. So how these things actually on Iyothee Das and how they started looking Iyothee Das in the pre-1990 era and post-1990 era. But I would say that some of the writings of until 2000, the writings which came from 1991 to 2000, the major writings like Geeta and Rajadurai and Aloysius and MSS Pandian's writing. So all Aloysius actually more concentrated on the ideological background of Iyothee Das here. So, but when we look at Geeta and Rajadurai and MSS Pandian, they started to look at Iyothee Das inside the Dravidian movement. But the most important, the two works actually, I'm really that actually turned Iyothee Das into an anti-caste intellectual. Professor Gajendra Nayathurai's work and Dickens Leonard's The Casteless Community. And these two works actually really transformed Iyothee Das from merely an ideological leader, an ideological icon to an anti-caste icon or anti-caste personality in Tamil Nadu. And we are looking at Iyothee Das as a kind of the person who generated a social justice in colonial Tamil. So from this perspective, actually, we started to look at.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Although this creates a different set of questions in my mind, maybe we can think of it later, because it seems to me someone talked about
Sure.
Tamil Buddhist memory has been kind of forgotten in between a particular period of time.
Yes,
Then there is
like Yogesh, in another perspective. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. I have a network connection. In another way, also we are looking at the Iyothee Das actually. In what way we are actually looking at Iyothee Das here? We are looking at Iyothee Das inside the national movement, because our national movement is something different. Different perspective is actually playing its part here. So we are looking at Ayodhya into two different ways. One way as a Dalit movement, in separate way we are looking at Ayodhya. In another way we are looking at Ayodhya within the national movement.
Okay.
So how he constructed, how he actually engaged with the national movement ideas and other things.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. There is a question, I
Thank
think,
you.
which is there for Sadasivam and Yogesh. I think this question is in the YouTube chat box, which says that,
Okay.
I think I'll read it out. Do you see a political application of Thass's anti-caste vision?
You can read it.
Yeah.
Question, please.
Are you following me? I think there's a network issue.
Sorry, I'm having a network issue.
Yeah. So the question is, do you see a political application of Thass's anti-caste vision in contemporary Tamil politics? Any example that you can cite? I think I'll just put it in the chat box as well. So in case if you are not able to.
1 second. We used to mention that as of now, I would only say that Tirumavalavan, the Dalit political leader, I would not say that it's a Dalit political leader. Sorry for that. I would say that it's an anti-caste leader. So who always projecting that they are for exclusively for the anti-casteism, and they always project that ideas very well, and they are promoting that ideas also very well. So we are looking. From my perspective, I'm looking that the president of Vidudalai Sirthigal Party, Tirumavalavan, as exactly in a replica of Ayodhya's ideas, because everywhere he goes there, he always emphasized that we are not a caste-based political party, so we are an anti-caste based political party, and the vision of what Ayodhya's actually tried to apply into the society, apply into the politics. Actually, more we can identify through the speeches and the writings and the field work done by him. So I'm looking him as exactly the anti-caste.
If you have any question for Deepak, or Deepak, if you have questions towards Sadasivam, that would be really, I think, exciting for me as well. I think that would be a great way to win. But Deepak, to come back to I don't. Is there anyone who wants to ask question? You can please raise your hand, or maybe just join in. That would be great. Deepak, for you, I was thinking. I mean, like this is again. I'm sure if you have maybe if you've already found it. I was inquisitive about the fact that quite often, as this other paper came out, right, reflected on that, which came out is that there is a Tamil Buddhist memory, right? So similarly, I mean, do we see any tradition being invoked when we think of Tamta? I hope I come out. Or let's say any sect, any religious, kind of or heterodox religious claim or lineage from they kind of make in their thinking.
Again, I'll have to look at the archive. So Tamta, there's the Tamta Sadasava, which was later renamed as Kumaon.
Yeah.
Shilpa's
you mentioned
Sadasava. Yeah. It had a sort of manifesto that was published, and it included a lot of aims and objectives, and it also gave a certain how do I say number of set of rules and guides to live by. And those, I think, can be used to conceptualize a notion of a society. But the thing is, not much. Not I. So far, I haven't been able to find any sort of research that has been done on Hariprasad Tamta. So because of that, it's a little bit difficult to make any argument at this point.
Okay.
Yeah. So far I have not been able to find any research, any book even.
Okay.
There recently one book came out, but it's also only a biography of Hariprasad Tamta.
Okay.
So
No, because I could immediately, although there is no sect, I mean, this is just a sabha you mentioned, because I could immediately relate to, there are many anti-caste sects of this time, late 19th century, early 20th century. One of them I have been working on, almost similar line of thinking. That is what I was trying to talk about. You have mentioned in your presentation, intoxication prevention towards intoxication drugs, live life of purity. There is an element of course, education, child marriage, ban child marriage, or start widow remarriage, elements which you have talked about in your paper. There are other many organizations or anti-caste sects which actually came up with similar sets of puritanical ideology, or similar sets of similar sets of positions.
Sir, I would not actually see it as a puritanical ideas when talking about intoxication and not drinking, because it is very much tied in with the gender question. Because when the issues that were emerging from excessive drinking were affecting women, so it's not, I don't think it's tied in with this idea of puritanical being, where you don't indulge in any sort of pleasure. But I think this is a criticism that comes from the women question, like who actually pays for the excessive drinking? What does it actually do to the domestic space? So therefore, I think these questions, I think it would be better to look at it within that framework.
So caste is something which is not in this context very much predominant.
To some degree it is, but I can't talk about it in my specific.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, so Sadasivam, there is a suggestion actually. You must refer to the PhD dissertation of Dr. Gajendran Ayathurai, which is on Iyothee, sir. Question from audience. Okay, I think it's been already answered. I think this has been okay. All right, I think we have come to the end of the session. If there is any other comments, questions, I really kind of felt enlightened listening to both of you. It's been learning for me on Tamta, and as well as we did not have two other speakers joining in today, so that actually gave us a lot of time to discuss. I thank Mohitosh for organizing such a brilliant sets of papers, putting them together into many themes and putting it together in general. I mean, it's been a very productive 2-day long seminar going on with many papers, many ideas getting in exchange, interactions are happening. So many thanks to the volunteer as well. Okay. Thank you so much. So thank you, Sadasivam. Thank you, Yogesh. Thank you, Deepak.
Thank you, Rajat.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you to all the volunteers.
Thank you.